Next slide. And these were some of the girls that were playing jump rope. And what's amazing is after all this devastation, to see the difference between these kids who have the hope of Jesus in their life, just the smiles on their faces and the fun that they can have. And, you go out on the streets where it's totally different. You can just see the desperation and the looks of the people. But these kids are all been evangelized to and have accepted the Lord and are really close with the Lord. And you can just see it in just their actions and their faces. Next slide. This was the final soccer match. And it's kind of fun because let's look at the next slide. Oh, this was just one boy who was just really, really cute, but he always was sticking his tongue out and smiling and playing. They had a boombox on this concrete ping pong table, and he was just dancing, and all the kids were dancing on the sidelines watching this game. Next slide. And these were a bunch of kids that every time somebody scored a goal, they would just start rocking out and having a good time running around the field. And I was noticing that the red team, every time they scored, that they would just get all excited. And whenever the blue team scored, no one got excited. I asked somebody, well, is the blue team from the neighborhood and they're not part of the orphanage? No, they're part of the orphanage. Well, how come they don't root for the blue team when they score? Well, they only root for the winning team. And it was sad. You really felt bad for this blue team, Next slide. And this was the tent structure, the beginning stages of it. We were trying to anchor risers to this wall, but even the wall was so brittle, still intact, that every time we would put an anchor in and then put the bolt in, it would pull the anchor out. I think we got 50% of the anchors, and half of those risers, we only had one anchor in them. So we had to build supports, and this was, the conditions where we were in the sun the whole time. That was the hardest part, was just being in the sun. It doesn't look that hot there because it's only 50 degrees outside, but it was 90 with 100% humidity. It was really tough. Next slide. This was Ava, the one EMT. She was designated the painter of the team. As they built the benches, she was varnishing them. Next slide. I don't know if you remember the original. Before I left, I spoke a little bit about how this team ended up linked up with this orphanage, but it was a story about the one lady who was on the roof of the orphanage that was praying, and this was the building next door that fell when theirs didn't. This was the house right behind the orphanage. Next slide. This again is John White. He's 76 years young. Those were three of the neighborhood boys that were living on the property here. Be praying for John. He won't slow down. He'll go until he almost passes out before he'll stop. We tried to get him to stop, and he just wouldn't. He's got 40 years of framing experience, and he was the project coordinator for this, and so we tried to protect him, but we couldn't. But anyway, he's got prostate cancer that got out, so he's got a great attitude. He knows that his years left are totally in the Lord's hands, but he's just got such a heart for the Lord and wants to serve, and he just goes all over the world, and it's amazing that a man of his age can do what he does. Next slide. This was after we finished the framework and we were getting ready to pull the cover over it. Next slide. And when we cleared the lot to prepare for the original work that we were doing, as soon as that started to be cleared, people in the neighborhood started bringing in and making their own shelters. And most of the Haitians, that's what they live in, except for the ones that maybe the Red Cross or the UN might have put up. But 99% of the Haitians live in structures like that. They just get whatever poles that they can find and dig holes in the ground and connect them with more poles and wires, and then they put bed sheets around them. And obviously it won't keep the rain out, but it'll keep them from being in the sun all day, and it gives them some privacy. And then they just have their little cook pots and build fires, and that's how they eat. Beans and rice is their total diet. And that little bit of shade that we're offering them is going to come in really handy for them. Plus it'll protect them from the rain. Just another shot of us pulling the tarp down. Next slide. we're trying to get it tight and tuck it under and nail it up. These are the benches that we completed. There's 20 of them there. Next slide. On Tuesday night, the night before we left, we had an outreach to the neighborhood. There was an area in the neighborhood called the Ravine that the people of the orphanage and the staff there will feed at least once a week. They go down and feed them. And they told the people of the Ravine that they were going to be doing an outreach and that at the end of that outreach they would give them food as they leave. And so we drew about 90 people from the Ravine up here. So right there's about 140 Haitians, but a lot of them are from the orphanage, but 90 of them weren't. And John gave an invitation at the end, and at least 40 of them raised their hands. And obviously some of those were probably people that were from the church in the Ravine, because that's their pastor sitting on the far side of the wall there. And he had raised his hand, but still we did find out later when we prayed for him that quite a few of them did accept the Lord for the first time, but a lot of them rededicated their life to the Lord, and then we laid hands and anointed a lot of them with oil. Next slide. These next few slides are the staff members. I'll give you their names if you could just be praying for them, because we go home after Sunday service and we have our nice, luxurious living conditions compared to these people here. I mean, they're living in very difficult conditions. They have no power unless they have a generator. Their water has to be trucked in and bought, and it goes into a cistern that's underground, and then it gets pumped up to a tank on the roof, and they have about 5 pounds of pressure, and it's never warm. It's always lukewarm. And then they don't have a lot of food to eat either. There's just not a lot of food to buy down there. So they really do a lot of sacrificing to serve down there. This is Dana in the center. The girl on the left and the right were our team members. But Dana, she's serving in a long-term mission down there, just helping out wherever she can. Next slide. This is Nancy and Tom. Tom is the brother of Bill and Suzette Manacero that started the mission. And Nancy's a registered nurse, and she's down there as the team nurse. They're down there on a long, short-term mission, about 3 months. Next slide. This was our team after we finished, right before we left on Wednesday. Next slide. This is Suzette and Bill Manaceros. They're the parents of Arianis, the 9-year-old who had the vision. Suzette is just amazing what she has done down there, and she finally broke down the very first time that we met them and started just sharing with what we were going to do for them down there. And I just think they really hadn't been debriefed, because when the earthquake hit, everybody just came to their facility, and they did some pretty horrific things that they weren't prepared for. They just did it. God supplied them with the energy and the wherewithal to be able to do things that they didn't think they were capable of doing medically. And it just the way that they're holding up and his back went out on him 2 days before we got down there, so he was just starting to get up and around when we showed up. But be praying for Suzette and Bill. They are doing an awesome thing down there, and they've got a lot of responsibility. Next slide.